So we're passing props all over the place, and the props that we're passing are mostly user, but we're also passing login, register, and logout. And instead of passing these as props and then prop drilling them all over the place, we're going to stick this into context, and then all the places that need access to those values can pull it out of context. To do this, we're going to create a context provider, and I could just create one right here, but I know that I'm going to need to access this context provider to consume that, so I'm going to put it in a separate file here in the source context directory under auth context. And this file is going to be really simple right from the start. We're going to import React from React, and then we're going to use React to create an auth context with React create context, and then we'll export that auth context. And that's all. We can use this auth context to render a provider and then use the same auth context to consume that context value. So then in our app, we're going to import auth context from context, auth context. And then I'll take that auth context and right down here around both our authenticated app and the unauthenticated app, we're going to render the auth context provider with the value, and we'll just use the same value that we were using for the props before. And then we'll take all of this, put it in as the children, and now any component in our React tree on both sides of our app will have access to all of these values. So before we go and update all of our props imports, let's just make sure that this is actually working by going to the unauthenticated app first. So instead of getting login and register from props, we're going to get login and register from React use context, and we need this auth context. So I'll paste that right in there. So we'll import auth context from context auth context. Great, let's save that. And if this is working, then we should be able to log in and register. So coming back here, we'll log out. So I'm just going to log in, and it looks like it's working just fine. Let's go ahead and make sure that register is still working, so I can register for hello. And registration's working just as well. So in review, to make this part work, we first had to create a context using react.createContext, and then we exposed that, and then we imported that into our app, and we rendered it around all of the components that we're rendering in our app, providing this context provider with this particular value that includes our user, the login, register, and logout functions. And then in the unauthenticated app, we used React use context with that context value that we've imported from the auth context module to get the login and register values from context, so we don't have to accept it as props anymore.